August 3, 1944, 05:17 hours, near Avranches, France. The dawn is still gray when the engines start. You can hear them before you see them, hundreds of American vehicles coughing to life almost at once. Sherman tanks, half-tracks, fuel trucks, command jeeps. The smell of gasoline hangs low over the hedgerows, mixing with damp earth and cordite. Somewhere down the line, a radio crackles, then another. Orders are short, sharp. There is no hesitation in the voices. This is not an army preparing to advance. This is an army already moving. At the head of it stands George S. Patton, helmet polished, ivory-handled, pistols at his hips, staring east. He does not look at maps anymore. He barely needs them. The Germans are breaking, and Patton can feel it the way a cavalryman once felt a frightened horse beneath him. Behind him, the U.S. Third Army begins to surge forward not by miles, but by dozens of miles a day. And far away, across the English Channel, men whose job it is to predict the future are already losing control of it. In London, British intelligence officers sit hunched over tables cluttered with reports stamped ultra-secret. These are the crown jewels of the war, decrypted German communications, pulled from the Enigma machine and translated in near real time. For years, Ultra has been the unseen hand guiding Allied decisions. It has warned of ambushes, revealed enemy strength, predicted movements with eerie accuracy. But now something is wrong. The reports are coming in late, not because the Germans are hiding, but because the situation is changing too fast. Unit locations listed at midnight are obsolete by dawn. German messages refer to American forces that are already somewhere else entirely. Patton's columns are outrunning the intelligence meant to track them. One officer circles a map location in red pencil, then stops. Another report contradicts it. A third renders both meaningless. Someone mutters that the Americans must be exaggerating their progress. Someone else says nothing, because the numbers don't lie. They never imagined an army could move like this. Back in France, the roads are choked with motion. Tanks roar past shattered villages where French civilians stand stunned, waving, crying, sometimes just staring. The pace is relentless. Drivers sleep at the wheel until they are shaken awake. Mechanics repair vehicles while engines are still warm. Fuel dumps are emptied almost as soon as they are established. Patton has issued his standing order. Do not stop for anything except fuel, ammunition, or orders. Not for enemy resistance, not for confusion, not for headquarters. German rear guards attempt to form lines and are gone before they understand what hit them. Columns of prisoners begin to appear, guarded by men who look almost embarrassed by how easy it has been. This is warfare stripped of ceremony, speed as a weapon, momentum as shock. And Patton is not improvising. He planned this in his head years before it happened. In London, Prime Minister Winston Churchill stands in the cabinet war rooms, cigar clenched between his fingers. The room smells of smoke and stale air. Maps line the walls, their pins updated constantly by aides who no longer look confident. Churchill has lived through reversals before. Dunkirk, Greece, Singapore. He trusts intelligence because he has seen what happens when leaders ignore it. But now intelligence is failing him, not because it is wrong, but because reality is faster. A senior officer briefs him carefully, too carefully. Prime Minister, according to our latest ultra-intercepts, German command believes the American thrust remains localized. Churchill raises an eyebrow. Believes, he repeats. The officer swallows. Yes, sir, but further reports suggest General Patton's forward elements may already be beyond that assessment. How far beyond? Churchill asks. There is a pause, an uncomfortable one. 40, possibly 50 miles, sir. Churchill exhales slowly. British planners had projected advances measured in weeks. Patton is achieving them in days. Across the channel, the German high command is reeling. Their messages betray confusion, then panic. Requests for reinforcements go unanswered. Units report American armor in places it should not be, could not be, yet unmistakably is. Ultra captures it all. But Ultra cannot explain it. Patton's army does not behave according to models. It does not pause to consolidate. It does not wait for perfect supply lines. It feeds forward, living off momentum, daring logistics to keep up, and somehow they do. British intelligence officers revise estimates again and again. Each time Patton exceeds them. Someone finally voices the thought, no one wants to admit. "We are no longer predicting his movements," the officer says quietly. "We are recording them after the fact." Churchill listens as another briefing ends. The room clears slightly. He remains staring at the map of France. The red arrows marking Patton's advance stretch farther than planned, farther than approved, farther than comfortable. He has spent his life warning against reckless generals. And yet, there is something else here, something unsettling, something undeniable. Churchill turns to a trusted aide and speaks more softly now, almost to himself. "This American," he says, "is not merely advancing, he is changing the very rhythm of the war." He knows what that means. If Patton continues at this speed, German defenses will collapse before they can reform. Political assumptions will shatter. Allied command structures will strain. The war itself may end sooner, or spin into something far less predictable. And for the first time, British intelligence is not leading events. It is chasing them. As night falls over France, Patton's headquarters rolls forward yet again. Another town liberated. Another map discarded. Somewhere in the dark, German commanders are trying to understand how the front has dissolved so completely. And in London, Winston Churchill begins to grasp a truth that unsettles him deeply. The war is no longer moving at the pace Britain understands. It is moving at the pace of George S. Patton. And that realization is only just beginning. The night reports arrive in London just after midnight. Stacks of paper, fresh decrypts, German transmissions pulled from the ether hours earlier. In another phase of the war, these documents would have shaped tomorrow's decisions. Tonight, they are already aging. In one intercepted message, a German corps commander insists American armored elements are still regrouping west of Le Mans. In another, sent only hours later, a panicked request reports American tanks crossing roads that British planners believed were at least 2 days beyond reach. The contradiction is impossible. Yet both messages are genuine. British intelligence officers exchange glances. Someone redraws the front line. Someone else erases it almost immediately. The pencils are wearing down faster than the situation can be clarified. Ultra was designed to reveal enemy intent. It was never meant to chase a moving target like this. Across France, Patton does not slow for nightfall. Convoys roll with headlights hooded, engines growling low. Officers lean over maps illuminated by flashlights, then look up and realize the ground has already changed. The Third Army is no longer advancing along a single axis. It is fanning out, exploiting every weakness, every hesitation. German resistance collapses in pockets. Roadblocks appear, fire a few shots, then vanish or surrender. Entire enemy formations are outflanked without ever being fully engaged. Patton's staff tries to keep track, even they struggle. A liaison officer asks where the boundary with a neighboring Allied army now lies. Patton snaps back without looking up, "Wherever we are." It is not bravado. It is fact. In London, Winston Churchill is awake again. He sits with his jacket off now, cigar burning down to ash as another briefing unfolds. The tone has shifted. Gone is the cautious optimism. In its place is something closer to disbelief. A senior intelligence officer clears his throat. Prime Minister, ultra traffic indicates German command no longer has a coherent picture of the American advance. They are issuing orders to units that no longer exist or no longer know where they are. Churchill leans back slightly, his eyes narrow. "And us?" he asks. The officer hesitates. "We are experiencing similar difficulties, sir." That lands harder than any bad news. British intelligence has prided itself on clarity amid chaos. Now, an American general has moved the battlefield faster than the system built to understand it. Churchill taps ash into a tray, slowly, deliberately. "So," he says, "we are watching history happen after it has already passed." No one contradicts him. The deeper Patton drives, the more the assumptions of the war begin to unravel. German doctrine depends on forming defensive lines, trading space for time, bleeding an enemy's momentum. But momentum is the one thing Patton refuses to surrender. Every hour he advances steals German options. Every mile forces their commanders into worse decisions. Ultra intercepts capture the desperation. Requests for fuel that cannot arrive. Orders countermanded before they are carried out. Entire divisions reporting contact with American armor on their flanks and then behind them. British analysts mark one message with a single word in the margin. "Overrun." Churchill asks for a private moment. The room empties until only a handful of trusted figures remain. He stands now, walking toward the massive wall map of France. The arrows marking Patton's Third Army are no longer neat. They sprawl, they twist, they overlap. This is not how wars are supposed to look. Churchill has seen brilliant generals before. He has seen reckless ones too. The line between the two is often drawn in hindsight and usually written in blood. Yet Patton's advance is not chaotic. It is precise in its aggression, calculated in its risk, ruthless in its exploitation of weakness. Churchill turns to his military advisor. "Tell me," he asks quietly, "has any commander in this war moved an army this fast without losing control of it?" The answer comes just as quietly. "No, Prime Minister." Churchill nods once. That more than the maps troubles him. At Third Army headquarters, Patton receives a message from higher command urging caution. Supply lines are stretched, flanks are exposed, intelligence is uncertain. Patton reads it, hands it back. "Tell them," he says, "that we'll worry about flanks when the enemy starts having some." The order is not arrogance, it is philosophy. Patton believes that speed creates its own security, that confusion is more deadly than firepower, that an enemy who cannot understand what is happening cannot stop it. So far, reality agrees with him. In London, Churchill finally speaks the thought he has been circling all day. He turns to the room and says, almost grudgingly, "General Patton is not fighting the war we planned." There is a pause. He is fighting the war as it exists. The implication hangs heavy in the stale air. If Patton is right, then every timetable must be revised, every assumption about German resilience reconsidered, every political calculation about the war's length rewritten. Churchill knows something else too. If this pace continues, control of the narrative and perhaps the strategy may shift away from London altogether. And that is a realization he is not ready to share publicly. Not yet. As the night deepens, Ultra continues to listen. Patton continues to advance, and the gap between intelligence and reality grows wider by the hour. Soon Churchill will put his thoughts into words, words meant for history, not headlines. And when he does, they will reveal just how profoundly one American general has altered the course of the war. Morning light filters weakly into the cabinet war rooms. It does nothing to soften the atmosphere. The men gathered around the table look as though they have aged overnight. Their collars are rumpled, Their eyes are red. The war has not paused for sleep, and neither have they. Another intelligence summary is read aloud. Another set of German transmissions intercepted, decrypted, analyzed. The pattern is now unmistakable. German commanders are no longer attempting coordinated defense. They are reacting blindly, desperately, to American armor appearing where it should not be. Orders are issued based on yesterday's reality, then immediately rendered useless. The word tempo appears in the margins of several reports. Not as doctrine, as a problem. Churchill listens without interruption. He does not pace this time. He does not smoke. He sits perfectly still, fingers steepled, eyes fixed on a single red arrow that has grown absurdly long. Patton's arrow. It stretches across France like a wound. When the briefing ends, Churchill dismisses most of the room. What remains is not an official meeting. It is something closer to confession. He turns to one of his oldest confidants and speaks in a low voice. "We built this war on information," he says, "on foresight, on knowing more than the enemy." A pause. "And now," he continues, "we are watching an American general outrun knowledge itself." The words are not bitter. They are unsettled. Churchill asks for Patton's operational summaries, not the polished versions, the raw reports, handwritten notes, fragmented radio logs, the kind of material that reveals intent more than outcome. As he reads, something becomes clear. Patton is not reckless, he is anticipatory. Every decision assumes the enemy will break faster than expected, and then acts as if that break has already happened. It is warfare built on psychological collapse rather than physical annihilation. Churchill recognizes the concept instantly. It is shock and awe before the term exists, and it terrifies planners who rely on measured progress. Outside the war rooms, the political world continues. Allies coordinate. Committees debate boundaries. Messages are drafted that attempt to impose order on a situation that refuses it. Churchill understands the danger. If Patton advances too far, too fast, he risks supply collapse, friendly fire, strategic overextension, the kind of disaster Britain knows too well. But another danger is emerging quieter, more uncomfortable. If Patton is right, then Britain's carefully constructed vision of how this war must end may no longer apply. Churchill retreats to his private study later that day. Here, away from advisors and officers, he allows himself the luxury of honesty. He dictates notes not meant for immediate release, thoughts meant to be refined later, or perhaps never shared at all. He speaks slowly, choosing words with care. "This campaign," he says, "has revealed a new dimension of modern warfare. Speed, when wielded without hesitation, becomes a force unto itself." He pauses. The American General Pat has demonstrated that an army in motion may impose its will not merely upon the enemy, but upon events. The secretary hesitates slightly, then continues writing. Churchill does not correct him. Meanwhile, Patton's Third Army continues east. There is no celebration, no sense of climax, just motion. German cities fall with barely a fight. Bridges are seized intact because defenders have not yet been ordered to destroy them or have already fled. Columns of prisoners stretch along roadsides, guarded by soldiers who no longer bother to count. Patton visits the front briefly, says little, looks at everything. Then he returns to his command vehicle and orders the advance to continue. Always forward. Back in London, Churchill reviews another ultra-intercept late in the evening. A German staff officer writes, with evident frustration, that American units appear to be everywhere at once. Churchill allows himself a brief, humorless smile. So, he murmurs, they finally see it. But Britain has seen it too, and that realization carries consequences. The war will not unfold neatly now. The end will come suddenly, violently, and on terms dictated by momentum rather than diplomacy. Churchill closes the file and sets it aside. He knows what must be said publicly will be measured, controlled, reassuring. But what he has said privately, what he has admitted to himself, is something else entirely. The age of deliberate war planning is giving way to something faster, more dangerous, and driven by a general who does not wait for permission from history. As night falls once more, Churchill prepares a message to Washington, one that acknowledges reality without surrendering authority. What he writes next will mark a turning point not just in the campaign, but in how Britain understands power itself. The message to Washington is drafted carefully. Every word is weighed, every phrase balanced between acknowledgement and restraint. Churchill knows how messages are read not just for what they say, but for what they concede. He does not criticize Patton. He does not praise him openly either. Instead, he frames the situation as a remarkable operational development, one that requires flexibility in expectations and adaptation in planning. It is the language of diplomacy. But beneath it lies an unspoken admission. The war is slipping beyond the frameworks Britain designed to control it. In France, those frameworks have already collapsed. Patton's forward units reach river lines the Germans believed they had time to prepare. Engineers throw bridges across under fire. Armor pours over before demolition charges can be set. Each success compounds the next. Supply officers panic and then improvise. Fuel is rerouted on the fly. Ammunition follows the sound of the guns. The Third Army becomes a self-feeding organism, sustained by motion. Traditional doctrine would demand pauses, consolidation, careful alignment with neighboring forces. Patton ignores it all. The enemy is not regrouping, so neither will he. German ultra-intercepts reveal a deeper problem now. The High Command no longer trusts its own reports. Messages are questioned, locations doubted. Commanders argue over whether American units seen on the horizon are real or remnants of earlier breakthroughs misidentified in the chaos. The fog of war has thickened, but only on one side. Patton thrives in it. Back in London, the British chiefs of staff meet again. The tone is no longer analytical, it is reactive. Questions dominate the room. What happens if Patton reaches the German border before plans account for it? What if Allied command unity fractures under the strain of uneven advances? What if political objectives cannot keep pace with battlefield realities? Churchill listens. Then he interrupts. "Gentlemen," he says, "we are not witnessing a breakdown of discipline." They look up. We are witnessing a change in gravity. The room is silent. Wars, Churchill knows, obey different laws at different moments. There are times when mass matters, times when firepower matters, and rarely times when speed alone reshapes everything it touches. This is one of those times. He recalls the early days of the war, the German blitzkrieg tearing through Europe faster than anyone believed possible. Britain had studied it, endured it, survived it. Now history has turned. The same principle is being wielded by an ally, and far more aggressively than British doctrine ever allowed. Churchill does not like the symmetry, but he recognizes its power. Another report arrives. Patton's spearheads have advanced again. The distance covered in a single week exceeds what British planners once allotted for an entire phase of operations. Someone mutters that this cannot continue. Churchill responds sharply. "It is continuing," he says. "That is the point." For Patton, the war has become almost abstract. He no longer thinks in objectives marked on maps. He thinks in enemy collapse rates, in how long confusion lasts before resistance hardens again. His goal is simple: Never give the enemy time to think. When aides warn him about political sensitivities, about borders, zones, agreements yet to be finalized, Patton brushes them aside. Let the politicians catch up, he says. We'll give them something to talk about. In London, Churchill begins preparing the public posture Britain will take. Measured optimism, Allied unity, controlled progress. But privately, he writes something else in his notes. He writes that modern war has entered a phase where initiative outweighs coordination, where speed overrules prediction, and where commanders who hesitate lose control not just of battles, but of outcomes. It is not a doctrine Britain has embraced, but it may be one it can no longer resist. As August wears on, one truth becomes undeniable. British intelligence no longer sets the tempo of the war. British planning no longer defines its shape. An American general, operating on instinct sharpened by experience, has seized something far more valuable than territory. He has seized time. And once time is taken, it is almost impossible to reclaim. Churchill knows the next phase will force a choice: to restrain Patton and risk losing momentum, or to follow him into a future Britain did not design. Soon he will decide. And when he does, the world will feel it. Late August 1944. London is quiet in the way only a city at war can be, alert even in stillness. Inside his study, Winston Churchill sits alone. No advisors, no generals, no intelligence officers hovering with new reports, just a desk, a lamp, and the accumulated weight of a global war pressing down on a single man. He has been thinking about Patton all day. Not the caricature, not the headlines, the phenomenon. The way an entire front has bent around one commander's will. The way German resistance has unraveled not under superior numbers, but under relentless pressure applied faster than reason can respond. Churchill opens a fresh page. This time, he is not writing to Washington. He is writing for himself, for the record he knows will one day be read when the war is over and judgment is rendered. He begins by acknowledging the uncomfortable truth. That British intelligence, for all its brilliance, had been built to predict wars fought at a certain pace. That ultra, miraculous as it was, relied on enemy communications that assumed time still existed. Patton removed time from the equation. Churchill writes that once an army advances faster than information can circulate, intelligence becomes history rather than guidance. It is a sentence he underlines. Across France, Patton's Third Army pushes toward the German frontier. Resistance stiffens slightly now, but too late to reverse what has already been lost. German commanders are no longer asking how to stop the advance. They are asking how to survive it. Patton senses the shift. He knows momentum has a shelf life. He pushes harder. He demands bridges seized intact. He demands night advances. He demands the impossible and watches his men deliver it, exhausted but unstoppable. Churchill's writing turns philosophical. He reflects on command, on restraint, on the British instinct to plan thoroughly, to coordinate carefully, to ensure political objectives are aligned before military risks are taken. Patton represents the opposite. A man who believes objectives are created by movement, not agreement. That victory defines politics, not the other way around. Churchill does not say this approvingly. But he does not dismiss it either. He writes a line that he knows will never be quoted publicly. General Patton has not merely defeated German formations, he notes. He has defeated the assumptions upon which this war has been conducted. It is the closest he comes to admiration. The page fills. Churchill acknowledges that had Patton failed, history would have condemned him as reckless. That speed without success is simply disaster arriving sooner. But success changes the verdict. Patton has succeeded. And in doing so, He has forced every Allied leader, including Churchill himself, to confront a new reality. The war will end not according to schedules, but according to collapse. As dawn approaches, Churchill sets down his pen. He knows what must come next. Publicly, Britain will support the advance while urging coordination. Privately, Churchill will allow Patton room, because restraining momentum now could be fatal. The decision is made without ceremony. The war will move at Patton's pace. Somewhere on the continent, Patton stands near a map illuminated by a single bulb. He studies it briefly, then turns away. "Gentlemen," he says to his staff, "we're going to keep going." They do not ask how far. They already know. In London, Churchill closes his notebook and locks it away. He understands something few will ever fully grasp. That in August 1944, the war changed speed. And once it did, no intelligence service, no committee, no grand plan could slow it again. The words he has written will remain private. But the truth they capture is already visible on the map. And soon it will be visible to the world. September 1944 arrives without ceremony. There is no pause to mark it, no moment where the war slows to acknowledge a new phase. The front simply keeps moving, dragged forward by momentum that no longer belongs to any one nation. Patton's columns reach ground that, only weeks earlier, Allied planners had treated as theoretical. Roads meant for later phases are taken now. Towns expected to resist instead surrender. German units dissolve under pressure that never lets up long enough to reorganize. The Germans are no longer choosing where to fight. They are choosing where to run. In London, the realization hardens. British intelligence regains clarity eventually, but only after the battlefield stabilizes enough to be measured again. By then, the damage is done. The lesson is permanent. Churchill understands it with the clarity of a statesman who has lived through too many turning points. Speed, once unleashed, does not ask permission. It dictates terms. Churchill never publicly credits Patton with rewriting modern warfare. He never needs to. The maps speak for themselves. So do the consequences. Allied planning adapts. Political negotiations accelerate. Lines once debated in committee are overtaken by events on the ground. The war's final shape is no longer theoretical. It is being carved in real time by armored columns and exhausted infantrymen pushing east. Years later, historians will debate whether Patton went too far, too fast. They will argue about logistics, coordination, ego. They will dissect what might have happened had the advance stalled. But those arguments exist only because the advance did not. In August 1944, George S. Patton forced the war to move faster than anyone, friend or foe, was ready for. And Winston Churchill, master of words and long vision, saw it clearly even then. That once the tempo changed, control became an illusion. Churchill's private notes remain locked away during the war. When fragments eventually surface, they reveal no flamboyant praise, only respect edged with unease. He understood what Patton represented. Not comfort, not order, but inevitability. The war would still be brutal, still costly, still uncertain in its final weeks. But after Patton's dash across France, one thing was no longer in doubt. The end would come suddenly. Not because intelligence predicted it, not because planners scheduled it, but because one general moved so fast that the future had no time to resist. And